I had a conversation with somebody that had a heart attack and didn't understand why because they were healthy, they were active, they were lean, and yet they still had a heart attack 4 years ago. After that event, this person decided to go into all of the research and figure out what causes heart attacks, why did he have one, and then what does this mean for his health, and what ways should he eat and test for the rest of his life. Hey guys, my name is Judy Cho, and I'm board certified in holistic nutrition. And I have a private practice where we have served over 2,000 carnivore clients and patients get to root cause healing. And that often starts with the Carnivore Cures all meat elimination diet. Today, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Daniel Trevor. He is the author of Unholy Trinity, and he sent me this book sharing about his citizen scientist journey in learning and understanding why he had a heart attack when he thought he was doing all the right things, eating all the whole grain oats, exercising, being lean, taking care of his body, and yet still ending up having a heart attack. In this book, he explains so much about the history of heart attacks, what causes heart attacks, what happens if you get a stent, or if you get on statins, and what tests to consider if you want to know if you are healthy or if you are at risk for getting a heart attack. In this conversation, he shares a lot about his book, and I applaud him for all of the research he has done, citing the studies, citing all the evidence he has found to figure out that eating a keto-carnivore diet is the best for heart health and longevity. Let's get right into the interview. Hi, Daniel. I'm very excited to have you join me today. I took a look at your book. It is, as I was saying offline, you've did a phenomenal job in touching so many different facets of healing and wellness and diet, and not only diet, but even just looking into areas of if you're a certain age, like these are some maybe supplements or things that you may want to consider. So bravo to that. I know it takes a lot of effort to put a lot of information into one book and then condense it and then have to have all the citations to prove, because most people don't like metabolic health or keto diets or carnivore diets. So bravo for that. For the people that have not heard of your book yet or have heard of you, if you can introduce yourself for the people watching and listening.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, you know about the amount of work that it takes because you're a veteran bestseller selling author and that kind of thing. Basically, what happened to me was about 4 years ago, I almost died of a heart attack. And it was a complete and total shocker because I thought I was Mr. Healthy. I was a slim, symptom-free, or so I thought, Mr. Healthy. But I didn't know about certain testing. I had just gotten a lot of tests that my doctors had ordered, like a stress test. I passed that with flying colors. And most doctors, as we'll discuss, they don't know the proper testing to discover where you are insofar as a metabolic health. I mean, I was talking about that with your colleague and friend who you've had on, Dr. Ken Berry, when I was on with him, and because we were talking about testing and everything. And see, what had happened to me was I had this heart attack, and then I took the dive into medical and nutrition science to find out how could this happen to me. And so I'm just a lower class street kid from Philly, right? And I shouldn't have to know any of this stuff, but I was very fortunate early on to learn how to study well. I learned how to conquer dictionaries and that kind of thing. And, because it's very important to not get stuck on terminology and nomenclature because, everybody's experience where you're reading something and you come across a word and you don't know it. And that paragraph you don't understand, your eyes get to the bottom of the page, you're blank. What did I just, you got to go back and go, okay, so catheter, what is that? Oh, and you look it up. I mean, these days we have these phones, you say, hey, Siri, what's the definition of the word catheter, right? And there she gives it to you. Now, don't say it. End. She's trying to find it already, right? You know what that's about. So you got to do it. It's a painstaking process at first, but the more you do it, the less you have to do it, especially if you're really interested in a certain topic. And after I had the heart attack, I was never more highly motivated to find out how this could happen to me. So I went to YouTube University and Google University and PubMed, and I found all these geniuses that are on the cutting edge of modern medical science and metabolic health. And, I would discover guys like Dr. Ken or Dr. Eric Berg or Dr. Ford Brewer, his video was the first one that really popped out at me. It was titled something like "How I Reversed 20 Years of Plaque and You Can Too," or something like that, right? I thought I need to watch this one. So he explained what happens in a heart attack. And I was fascinated because, and it was a little technical because this is a few years ago. And but I was able to follow it. I watched it again and again, cleared up all my terminology and that kind of thing. But anyway, so yeah, then I took the dive and I thought I was shocked and infuriated by what I found. There has been so much corruption. And I thought, you know, I need to write this for my friends and family. And, and then it turned into a book. I need to share this with the world. This is incredible. And reading it was like, what? Are you kidding me? They've been fooling us that long. And so anyway, it was just really crazy to confront all that and then throw it together. And like I said before, I have a lot of citations and references because I felt I needed that backup. I'm not a doctor or a scientist. Just think of me as a friendly relay point of the best of what 21st century science has to offer for your health and wellness, and fix yourself. I did. You can too.
First of all, I commend you for putting the energy to figure out what happened to you, because, and that is a question of mine that I want to ask you, but there's a lot of people that will have a heart event and they'll listen to their cardiologist that says, eat low fat, do all the things that are not ideal for us. And
They
then
get to
secondly,
talk.
yeah. And then secondly, of course, like people, we tend to in our society to believe that if somebody's a medical doctor, they must know best. And so we trust that, or we trust that science. But I think there is power in somebody that has had a heart event or a heart attack and then goes down a deep dive because it is so close to their heart, their passion, and it means something to them to understand it. And then sharing that, hey, don't let what happened to me happen to you. And here is it in the most simplest way that you can understand, because this is how I got to this place. And I think there is power in that, in sharing your story and then explaining the science in a more simplistic way so people can understand it. Because when, like you were mentioning earlier, if you use all this jargon and nomenclature, you lose people. And sure, you sound smart, but if you lose people, what's the point? So I love that.
Exactly. Exactly. What's the point? Are you trying to impress people with
Right.
your brilliance? I mean, dazzle them with your terminology and your vocabulary? No. The whole idea, I wrote it from the viewpoint of, I thought I need to write this for Uncle Joe and brother Dave, who are smart, but they're just not technically oriented.
Right.
So I'll mention the study and how many people were involved. It was over this many years, and this is the results. So stop doing that. Right?
Right.
Stop eating that thing or change the way you're going about it because it's all wrong. The source root cause of many and most of actually the modern diseases that are killing us that have come about just in the last century, in the 20th century is when all this nonsense started happening. It all comes from having some degree of a diabetic physiology. 74% of doctors, now we're talking GPs and family physicians, internists, and cardiologists, 74% do not know how to properly diagnose or test for prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. It's just what? What they do, most doctors, what they do is they'll test fasting blood glucose and A1C. And if you just do that, even the American Diabetes Association, who I don't trust as far as I could throw them, even they say, hey, you're going to miss a lot of people because so many people can test normal with those two and
Right.
be a raging type 2 diabetic. That was me. That was the source root cause of my heart disease and my fatty liver disease, which I'll tell you about, and my osteoporosis. So I had 4 comorbidities that I had no clue because none of these things have symptoms.
I think it's so interesting that if we were to just take a second and pause and think about all the rhetoric we've been taught about our diet. So heart attacks are because of saturated fats or cholesterol. So we need to reduce everything. There was a point where when I was young, it was you can't eat more than 2 eggs a week, or maybe it was 2 eggs a day because of the cholesterol limit. And now they've done away with that. But all of these things, even the low fat diet craze, that fat makes you fat. Most people try to follow these narratives, and heart disease is more prevalent than ever. So clearly it's not fully working. But given all that, I want to ask you, so what is that test? And then how is blood sugar related to a cardiovascular event?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Let me back up just a little bit.
Mhm.
I answered both of those questions, but what happened was the graph on heart disease going, I have this in the book too, and I think it's in chapter 1. It goes from 1900 to 1955, and it's like this, right? From bottom left to top right. 1955 is where President Eisenhower had a stroke, and it was a big deal. And other, men and women were dropping in the prime of their life, and we're going, what's going on here? Why is that? And this joker came along named Ansel Keys, who I'm sure you know, and he had this theory that it was the meat and the butter and the cheese and it was clogging things up. And the analogy he gave was something like, well, it's kind of like a shower drain where you have the soap and the grease and the gook and it all kind of clogs up. And it's not that way at all. It just doesn't work that way at all, right? But he convinced people, oh my God, it reminds me of that Mark Twain quote. What was it? It's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled, right? It's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled. Because once they get an idea locked in like that, and hey, this certain newspaper said this, and it was a headline here, and the American Heart Association says this, and it's just they don't know, or they listen to their doctor because, hey, the doctor's got a white jacket, knows all, sees all, right? And they don't know that they're trained, that they don't get this kind of training that you know about now and that I certainly know about. They don't learn anything about nutrition or metabolic health. I think the primary reason for that is because the medical schools are underwritten. They're funded by big pharma. Do they want them reaching for the prescription pad, or do they want them talking to the patient about his diet? Are you getting to the gym? Are you walking? They don't want that. So all they learn is the patient presents with XYZ ailment. They have a drug for that. And that's what they're taught. Listen, I'm not blaming a lot of them because they are working in these institutions and maybe in a clinic that, they have to keep things moving. That's just their job. They are paid to keep things moving and that kind of thing. See, after the heart attack, I found out about all these different tests from all these geniuses on YouTube and on the website and so forth, their websites. So I decided to get a lot of testing done because I wanted to have a benchmark to measure 3 months, 6 months, and so forth down the line. So I see if I'm making progress. And I knew I was going to have a bad report card, but I wanted to know, what was the good, what was ugly, and all the good, the bad, and the ugly, like the Clint Eastwood movie. But anyway, so my numbers were really bad in most of the important areas, but I didn't know about a lot of it. And this test that you want to know about. Okay. See, like I said, most doctors, they test the fasting A1C and the fasting blood glucose. The test that they need, that they don't order, is the OGTT with insulin, oral glucose tolerance test with insulin. And doctors don't order it because that is where you will really find out where you are in the diabetic spectrum. Are you normal and you don't have any, or you're pre-diabetic, or are you full-blown type 2 diabetes? That's what I discovered. I was a full-blown raging type 2 diabetic and I didn't know it. And that was the source of my cardiovascular disease. And it was also the source of my non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which now, because of all the push on the big food and Western diets, um, it's now the largest liver disease on the planet. I think they're saying like 1 in 3 people globally. It's like, what? And it's mostly because of the high fructose corn syrup. And I didn't know. I mean, I looked at my pantry, so many things in my pantry. I'm saying, oh my God, it's in this, it's in that. And so, because big food, they put that in everything, and it's just deadly. So that's the answer to that one. That's the OGTT with insulin, oral glucose tolerance test with insulin. And I also have it. It's also covered in chapter 22. What I did was, when I was writing the book, I reached out to Dr. Ford Brewer. He's this, world-renowned preventive medicine expert out of Johns Hopkins, and he specializes in heart attack and stroke prevention. And I said, would you write a chapter in my book that delineates what exactly are the most important blood labs and scans that anyone can buy online without needing their doctor? That way they can find out for themselves, right? Because sometimes what will happen is, let's say one of your viewers will go to your doctor and say, hey, I want to get this OGTT with insulin, or I want to get this other one I heard about, and this third one too. I'd like to, and too many times they'll say, oh, you don't need that. You're fine. You don't need that.
Right.
And the only reason they're saying that is because they don't know what it is. They wouldn't know how to analyze the results anyway. And it's just like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Because the last thing that doctors want to get from their patients when they're in and out in 7 minutes is homework. They don't want to have to go study, why is this OGTT with insulin so important? What is the diabetic metabolic symptoms, and what are the signs that get us there and that cause all of these major diseases that are silent?
Yeah. And I think it's also because I have peers and friends that are doctors as well. And sometimes it's also that the insurance won't cover it. And so it becomes
Yeah.
a nightmare on the back end. And then they have to prove their case of why this patient particularly needed the coverage of a certain lab test. And so just to make their lives easier. And I get it. If you're seeing, I think of maybe 100 patients in a day, it becomes easier if you just, follow status quo so that everything for sure will get through insurance and you have less paperwork and less administration. So it's all messed up. I totally understand. I wanted to ask you, in the book, you mentioned that people with higher cholesterol tend to live longer. Can you share a little bit about what you found in that area? Hey guys, just a really quick interruption. If you notice, we don't really run ads on this YouTube channel. And just being fully candid, instead of making money on external sponsors, we really wanted to share more about our functional medicine practice so that if you ever need it, you know that what we offer and what we can provide in terms of service and products. If you didn't know, our private practice has one-on-one sessions. We have packages. We do group calls with SIRS and with mind body or nervous system regulation. And we also do a lot of functional tests. Some people do a complete wellness panel with us. So once a year, they get a detailed, comprehensive blood work to see how their health is doing. We also do functional tests such as stool tests to see if you have parasites or candida or H. pylori. We also do a lot of the Dutch urine as well as saliva tests to make sure that your hormones and thyroid is functioning well. Our flagship is our symptom burden, where we really trust the innate wisdom in our bodies. And so we are trying to see what symptoms do you have, because oftentimes a combination of symptoms is related to a specific system. We focus on gut health, where we try to get people's gut healing because most of our immune system is in our gut. If you make your own body stronger, you will be a lot more resilient to everything that is in our toxic world. We believe in wellness for all, and not everyone can afford to work with us. So we provide a lot of free guides, free ebooks, free downloads, free tactical things to get you healing in your wellness journey. We also write comprehensive, detailed articles. For example, why a carnivore diet may have lower T3 markers, but may be in fact okay. I hope that the content I share is enough for you to get healing. But if the needle is not moving enough with a carnivore diet, with lifestyle changes, with mind body work, if it's not moving enough when you are working alone, just know that we have the services to support you when and if that day comes. Because we are holistic health, we also have a prescriber. So if you are on thyroid medications or hormone medications, or you need medications for SIRS, we are able to walk you through the process. Our goal is to get you off most of your medications. All right, guys, thank you for being part of this community. Let's get back into the video.
If doctors look at cholesterol, they're looking at mostly the LDL, but what they never do is they never do what's called the fractionation, which they break it down. There's good LDL. And now I'm not talking about good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. They're talking about the LDL, low density lipoprotein. There's good, fluffy, buoyant, healthy, benign LDL, which is what you want. You want a lot of that. That's called pattern A. And then there's these nasty boys called pattern B, which is the small, dense LDL particles. And those are the ones that can invade the artery wall through this process called transcytosis. They store up underneath because it's very sticky in there. And then the immune system starts sending, cytokines and foam cells and macrophages and it starts to build up plaque over time. And it's soft, dangerous plaque. That's the source of the cardiovascular disease. But there's just so many studies that reflect that it's high cholesterol. And they found that people with low cholesterol usually die much earlier and usually of some form of cancer. I mean, it's just backwards to what we've been taught. And the doctors and I taught this. Many cardiologists don't even know it. There's a difference between the soft, dangerous plaque and the calcified plaque. And there's a big misunderstanding. And just in the last few years, that some amazing science came about. And I was talking about this with Dr. Philip Ovadia, who, as you know, is a cardiologist, done over 3,200 heart operations. And he's also carnivore. And we were discussing how there's the soft, dangerous plaque is what happens in a heart attack is this. Once that soft plaque develops underneath the artery, it can rupture through the endothelial or the lining of the artery and spill into what's called the lumen, which is where the blood flows. It touches blood, it creates a clot, it breaks off and goes downstream, so to speak. And if it goes to your heart, you have a heart attack. And if it goes to your brain, you have a stroke. Now, these can happen anywhere in your body, in your joints, not the bone joints, but in, where the different arteries are. So it's not just in the heart. These things can be anywhere in your body because it's systemic. So once that happens, then you've got this heart attack and you've got to get to the hospital right away because they have this thing called the golden hour. And I was fortunate because when I was having mine, I was right across the street from one of the top heart hospitals in the country. I was like, what? I lucked out with that one because what they say is if you're having a heart attack, if you wait longer than an hour, muscle of the heart starts to die. And once it dies, it's not coming back. So you want to get there. You don't want to worry about, I'm going to embarrass myself or this or that. I don't want to inconvenience my brother Joe because he's got to, drive me there. Just get there. And usually what the symptoms are, and it's not the Hollywood where you're grasping your chest and all that. I guess it can be that because but a lot of times it's mostly a sensation in the top part of your body. I personally had these sensations in my throat area. It was kind of like what I felt like you might feel at the beginning of a cold or a flu, that kind of thing. And so, but I was feeling really strange and I felt cold sweats come on. So I went in there and it drew some blood right away. And I scored very high on this protein called troponin, and along with a 12-point EKG and that kind of thing. And they confirmed I was having an MI, myocardial infarction, also known as a heart attack. And it was just a shocker to me. And so I let my daughters know, and they were soon at my side. But it was a real shocker because again, I was a lean, symptom-free. I made it to the gym. I thought I was eating healthy. I was eating all the heart healthy whole grains that is just destructive.
Well, let me ask you this. So in your book, you mentioned that that stents and bypass surgeries that I think it's about 85% are unnecessary. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Oh my God, that's such a great question. They had these big trials. There was this, I covered this in chapter 17. This first one, it was called the ischemia trial. It was a large $100 million government funded trial. It involved 5,187 patients. They divided them into two groups. One group got invasive procedures, which was CABG, CABG, that's coronary artery bypass graft. That's open heart surgery with, bypass, or a PCI, percutaneous coronary intervention, which is a stent. They got one or the other. And the other group too, they sent them in the direction of lifestyle. Drop 30 pounds, stop eating the junk, get back to the gym or start walking, that kind of thing. And they followed them closely for 4 years. And at the end of the 4 years, see, what they wanted to do is they wanted to prove that these invasive procedures, they were the shit. They were the real deal because there's so much of an enormous amount of money with those procedures, right? That's what they wanted to prove. It was a failure. They failed to show that these invasive procedures were any better than going in the direction of lifestyle changes because there was no difference. No difference in events, heart attacks, strokes, and that kind after the 4 years. And then they followed up. There was the Orbita trial and the same failures. They failed to show that these invasive procedures, now, to be clear, these invasive procedures can be life-saving interventions in emergency situations. If the
Right.
person's having a heart attack, if there's some emergency in the hospital, but that's only 15% of the time. The
Right.
other 85% of the time, these procedures are done for prevention.
Mhm.
And these big trials show that they don't work for prevention. That was the big headline. And this rocked the medical community, the cardiology community. And so I asked in the book, I said, do you think now that we've established this, that these invasive procedures would start to maybe not come to a halt, but start to slow down? The chart is like this. There's more being done than ever before.
Let's say you had a family member, your brother had that discussion with the doctor and he said, I think you should get a stent or for prevention. You obviously know that lifestyle is a great factor, but what if your brother's like, I don't, yeah, like, sure, I'll try the lifestyle, but you know, he really won't change his lifestyle because there are people out there. So then would you then say, maybe you should get the stent? So all I'm saying is if lifestyle is not a factor because some people are not willing to change their lifestyle, then what's the next best option?
Well, there will be many people who will just not change their lifestyle. They
Right.
just, and it's a shame because it's mostly because they're so addicted,
Mm-hmm.
right? These big food companies have biochemical geniuses in their conference rooms and labs around the world trying to figure out, okay, so what is it? What are the chemicals that we can put into these ingredients,
Right.
added to the ingredients that makes them crave more of it, that wants them to eat the whole bag instead of half the bag. So it's more bottom line and profits as to what's good for human beings. And I even say, look, don't ever, hold anything against the person who's overweight or obese because it's very difficult to not obey what their taste buds are demanding. And a lot of it comes from the wheat. Check this out. And to end off that, I mean, I would tell them, look, if you want to get on the statin, do that, but there are alternatives. I would tell them about the alternatives. It wouldn't be my brother because he's listening to me, right? Because we had the same genes. Mom had the heart attacks, dad had the stroke, so we have the same genetics. So he followed me. I said, Dave, look, this is, he doesn't get into the studies like I do,
Okay.
but anyway, but with a friend or a relative, you just have to say, hey, look, there's this book I found or this website, listen, or this video, share a video with your friend and let them know that there's alternatives. And the doctor is not always going to be, he doesn't always know the right thing to do. It's not his fault. It's just that his overlords are pointing him in the direction of drugs and procedures, and more drugs and more procedures. That's what he's trained to do. That's what is demanded of his bosses that he do. And that's what they're taught.
Right.
So you have to know to be able to ask about certain tests and then get them on your own. Because, like we were saying about the OGTT with insulin, they might say, oh, no, you don't need that. You can get it for yourself online. There are these online labs, which I talk about in the book. I tell you where to go and which websites they are. You can order yourself the OGTT with insulin. I think is like 50 or $60.
Mm-hmm.
That way you'll know where you are and if you are in the diabetic spectrum and know that you either have work to do or you're just fine. But you can buy them yourself. Now, I know a lot of people, 50 or $60. I mean, try to get that together to do that. I know you have insurance and you'd like to cover it with that, but I'm going to let the audience decide what they want to do there because it's that important.
Yeah, I think it's really you pay now or you pay later. So we work with a lot of the chronically ill and they wish they knew about carnivore and a lot of these, even the environmental illnesses 20 years earlier and how much could their life have been different and the fees they paid even with insurance. There's always special tests or special medications or supplements that are not covered by insurance. And if we knew from the very beginning that wheat isn't ideal for us or that eating saturated fats is good for the brain and for the body, then how much could we have prevented our illness? And so that's where it is really hard to have people change their lifestyle, especially when their cardiologist, after having a heart event, will say, you need to follow low fat, you need to start eating more whole grains. And you are so scared that you will have a repeat event that you're willing to listen to the person in the white coat. And of course, why wouldn't we? Why shouldn't we, when they are the ones that went to medical school and had years and years of extra schooling and then fellowships and internships? But the reality is they don't learn about nutrition, and everything is compartmentalized in the way that they learn medical school. And I think if we were to just take a second and learn, how do they even teach in medical school? You'll see everything is based on symptomatology equals what disease. How do you figure out what illnesses are present and not having confounding factors? And then you'll realize, oh, maybe they don't know what they're talking about when they're recommending these dietary guidelines, because they probably never learned about nutrition. So with all that said, tell us about wheat.
Oh my God, you are just so right on with that. And just let me say one thing with regard to what you just said, which is perfect because this guy wrote the book on the whole wheat area. And his cardiologist, Dr. William Davis, and he had a quote, and he's got this one book, besides all the wheat books that he wrote, Wheat Belly and so forth. He's got this one book that's just amazing. It's an expose on the medical community. And he had this one quote, I have it in the book in the introduction. He said something like, hamburger contains no ham. There are no grapes or nuts in grape nuts. And health does not come from healthcare. And this book was an expose on, because he spent decades he was an interventional cardiologist doing stents and this and that. And he just reveals the whole deal, how it is there. So I recommend that to anybody. And that's a real eye opener. But with regard to the wheat, I have the chapter called, Are You a Wheat Addict? And the reason for that is, and again, one of the images that I have is this, the skull of a guy who's 100,000 years old and he has perfect teeth. And I asked the reader, do you think he had an orthodontist, floss 3 times a day? The guy, none of that. But after they started exhuming bodies, because we didn't start eating wheat and grains until about 9 or 10,000 years ago. And when they started exhuming bodies after that point towards the present, they found all these new diseases coming in: tooth decay, missing teeth, bones shrunk in diameter and width. Men shrunk 5 inches, women shrunk 3 inches. It all changed. It went nuts after that. And all these new diseases, not as bad as the last 100 years or so with what's happened in the 20th century. But anyway, so what they found was later on in the, let's see, it was late 60s, early 70s, I think it was, where Big Ag came up with this. They wanted to get a more bountiful crop. And what they did was they came up with this. It used to be, grow to shoulder height, right? Now it's only 18 inches. It's called semi-dwarf wheat. And what they did was they used this process called chemical mutagenesis and radiation mutagenesis. And what does that do? That amps up this chemical called gliadin, Gliadin, gliadin. And what does that do? It attaches to the opiate receptors of the brain. It doesn't get you high or relieve pain, but what it does is it makes you crave more of the things that have wheat and grains in them, like the bread, pasta, crackers, biscuits, waffles, pancakes, chips, pretzels, and pizza crust, and so on. And it makes you crave that. And so again, I feel for these people, but once you get through that and you pass that point where you start to eliminate them little by little, you no longer have the cravings, because as you know, wheat raises the blood sugar higher than table sugar.
Right.
Wheat raises the blood sugar higher than a Snickers bar. I even have that study in there too. It's like, oh my God. So, it's hard to resist these things because the big food is really coming after our opiate receptors. Because check out this stat. The average supermarket has 60,000 products. Over 59,000 contain wheat or some form of wheat. It's like, it's insane. And I give all the aliases that they use because you got to really read be vigilant in reading your ingredients. Even Twizzlers, the candy, the second ingredient is wheat.
Right.
And like I said, they're really coming after our opiate receptors because, carbs don't satisfy appetite. They stimulate it.
No, I could totally attest to everything you said. My oldest son, I was still plant-based. The 6 months in, he went on formula. And even though it was like the organic and everything, it had seed oils and it had a lot of the sugars. And we were feeding that when he went to bed. So he went to bed with formula in his mouth. And
Mm.
the first year he started, we were getting the organic oats, the pincher grass little snacks that would help him learn how to use his pinchers. And if you think about it, it's crazy that we think that, but so we got snacks that purposely was feeding him wheat all day long because we thought that
Wow.
was the right thing to do, like the whole grains, oats. And
Exactly.
I can say that within, I think when he was 3 or 4, we went to the dentist and he had 4 cavities. And we brushed his teeth morning and night. Now, my second child, by then I was carnivore, and he nursed for 4 years and nursed his only nurse like the last few years or 5 years is it was the very at the end of the night. And so I always thought, oh no, my breast milk, the sugar in it is going to give him cavities. He never had those pincher grass snacks. He may have wheat now occasionally, but he's never had a cavity ever. And he never
Wow.
brushed his teeth after having breast milk, which has sugars in it. But I think it's something about these man made products that then, and they're both from us. And it was only my older child, we limit a lot of the carbs, and he's never had a cavity since.
That's awesome. Inflamed mouth,
Mhm.
inflamed heart, because they're both connected.
Yes.
They found, things in here that affect your heart, and they're in both locations. So it's that's wild. Well, good for you that you found out the truth, because both of us had these health issues that we
Right.
went through to put us on this path. I mean, my biggest regret is having to have this life-threatening event to place me on the path, but I wish I would have known a lot sooner.
Right.
But again, maybe it was meant to be, because now you've written these wonderful books and you're pointing people in the right direction. You got this wonderful YouTube channel, and my hat's off to you, girl.
Well, look at you too. I mean, now that you've learned all this stuff, you can share. I think your book is pretty good in terms of here's a test that you could take. Here's what to look out for. Here's some of the dietary interventions, and then you share the studies. If you're like, I don't know if I really believe you, and it's like, don't trust me, trust these studies, and I think it's pretty powerful. In your book, you also mention that statins can actually increase the risk or susceptibility to diabetes. Can you share a little bit about that?
And I'll cover two studies real quick. This
Okay.
one that you're asking about is they were looking at people that were taking statins and people that were not taking statins. And the people that were taking statins had 45% higher chance of having and developing diabetes than the group not taking the statin. And they weren't real definitive, but I have a feeling what happens is, and I've met men like this at the gym and so forth. Oh, I'm on a statin. I can eat anything. Right? They think that they take the statin and they're Superman. They can withstand eating going to McDonald's and eating the meat's okay, I guess, but they have the bread and the toppings and the soda but it's so crazy that it's more of a mentality, and what they tend to believe from their doctors and so forth, and what they assume because they don't really know. And again, we come back to, what's his name? Mark Twain. It's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled, right? But the thing is that before you get any symptoms, I come back to, there was John F. Kennedy had a quote. It was something like, the time to repair the roof is when the sun is shining. Right. So I love that. I mean, I wish, I would have delved into this a lot earlier and not almost kicked the bucket, but that's what I'm looking at that one. And there was another study that I cover in there where this study involved 92,135 patients, because patients want to know, if I take a statin every day for the rest of my life, how much longer am I going to live?
Right.
Is it months, years, decades? What am I? So the researchers set out to answer that. And so they wanted to find how much longer. Was it years, decades? And what they had two groups. Anyway, they found that those in the group taking statins for primary prevention, in other words, no heart attack yet, they're just taking it because their doctor says something crazy about their LDL or some nonsense. those people taking the statin for that, for primary prevention, they lived a big 3 days longer than those in the other group not taking statin. And the people in this group taking statins for secondary prevention, in other words, they already had a heart attack, they lived a big 4 days longer.
Initially, the doctors were, or the researchers, the people that made the statins, they were going after HDL and trying to find a drug that would increase HDL,
Yeah.
and they couldn't find something that would work enough. So instead, they had a miracle drug that would lower LDL. But we started this conversation sharing that people that have higher cholesterol tend to live longer. And if you think about that, statins lower your cholesterol, and they're not only choosing the bad cholesterol or the bad LDL that are oxidized, it's picking all cholesterol. And our bodies produce more than 60% of the cholesterol needed. And if it was so bad, why would your body use so many of your resources to produce a product that is bad for your system? And so if we think about all of that, it's probably not the best idea to get on statins, especially for preventative.
Oh my God, you're so right. And even, the guys, it lowers testosterone. After age 30, it starts going down 1% a year.
Okay.
And when you reach a certain age, see, cholesterol is a precursor to testosterone. So if you don't have enough cholesterol, you're going to have low testosterone. That will attract a lot of diseases of aging. And well, you know all about that. And so, you just have to be careful in this area.
Let me ask you really quick about testosterone, because I know you cover it. What are your thoughts on HRTs? Do you think people should take it? I know in your book you mentioned if you do take it, there are certain markers to monitor. If you could tell me a little bit about testosterone
Sure.
and HRTs.
Yeah. Well, again, they've found that men with low testosterone or mid to low, they're way more likely to develop Alzheimer's and dementia and all these other diseases than if you have normal. And the way to do that is what I do is I take this very tiny dosage. I inject it once every 10 days of testosterone. It's not, high bodybuilder type dosages. It's very small amount every 10 days. And that keeps it right at where it's supposed, like a high normal.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want it blasting out that, I don't need that. I'm not looking to become a bodybuilder or anything. I don't have any of those kind of goals. But I do that every 10 days. It's easy to get from your doctor. He'll have you have him test your testosterone and they'll say, oh, wow, you're down around 300. We need to do something. So I ask him for, it's real simple to do. It takes like 2 minutes and you're done once every 10 days and you feel fantastic. And I'll tell you, when I started doing it, I just felt a lot better. I mean, I cleared up mentally. I got any kind of fog went away. Um, when I went to the gym, the weights seemed lighter. I don't know what that was about, but you know what I'm saying. And so, because it's what helps make a man be a man insofar as your muscular development and so forth. And by the way, I have a whole chapter 9, which goes into what are, exercise and what are the best exercise for over 40. Here's a quick one. They did this big study. I think it was 95 meta-analyses, and they wanted to find out for people over 40, is it cardio and aerobics, or should they be doing resistance training, like with the weights and the resistance machines? And what they discovered, and they measured it against the metabolic markers like HDL, A1C, triglycerides, and so forth. And they found there was so much of a more tremendous benefit from doing the resistance training than from doing the cardio and aerobics. And yet when I go to the gym, I see all these older folks, they're all on the treadmills and the bikes and they're going like this and it's so, to me, it's just ancestrally inconsistent. Doing the cardio anyway. I mean, I guess it's good for competition and that kind of thing, but I was just talking about this well, anyway, I don't want to bring up his name, but we were looking at the fact that, we want to do everything that's ancestral. How did these evolutionarily developed bodies, how did they behave? What did they eat for millions of years? Proven by anthropologists and bioarchaeologists. We were eating meat.
As we're closing, are there tests that you recommend, knowing all that you know? And I know you also bring up like best supplements and best exercise, as you mentioned, and then best testing. Are there certain tests that, as we're closing, the people that maybe they don't end up getting your book, but if they were to go to their doctor, obviously you brought up the OG, the glucose tolerance test. I think some women do that for pregnancy, but are there other tests that you would recommend?
If I were to choose 4 or 5, these are the ones that I would get. Number one, get the OGTT with insulin, because that is, you got to know where you are in the diabetic spectrum. Because what I've done since I discovered that all these most of the modern major diseases that we have are all coming from having a certain degree of diabetic physiology. So that's why I have labeled having a diabetic physiology or diabetes the gateway disease, because you got to get that one first. Because if you have that, you're going to have cardiovascular disease. You're going to have all these other, that was Joseph Kraft discovered that back in 1975. He had this quote, something like, those with cardiovascular disease not identified with diabetes are simply undiagnosed.
Right.
And then after that, he discovered that he had done thousands of autopsies and that kind of thing. But anyway, the first one is the OGTT with insulin. The next one are these inflammation markers that tell through a blood test if you've got this soft inflamed plaque, and that's MPO, myeloperoxidase, LP plaque 2, and MACR, microalbumin creatinine ratio. You can put these in the show notes if you want. And those are what I call smoke detectors, because those will tell you if your arteries are on fire and they're inflamed, because again, these are silent, right? And that will lead to the cardiovascular disease and that kind of thing. So the next one down, it's a male or female panel. Now, there's a few different places where you can get those. I recommend where to get those in the book as well. And this is all in, I think I have it. We're going to have it up at danieltrevor.com pretty soon anyway. And then the last one is what's called NMR lipoprofile, nuclear magnetic resonance lipoprofile. And what that does is it breaks down to what I was talking about before. It takes your LDL and you go, okay, do you have pattern A or pattern B? Well, you're heavy duty pattern B. Oh my God, that means I have the small, dense LDL particles that can invade the artery wall and like that. The great news is ketogenic, keto, carnivore, lion diet, all those, they can turn those small, dense LDL particles into the large, fluffy pattern A. The analogy that I give in the book is you can think of the arteries as like cobblestone streets. If you threw out some beach balls, that would be the pattern A. They would just bounce around, freely and that kind of thing. But if you threw out some marbles, which would be analogous to the small, dense LDL part, they would get caught in the cracks and the crevices of the cobblestone street, go underneath, subendothelial, develop plaque over time. And so that's an easy way to think about it. But I would get those 4, and then you'll know exactly where you are on a lot of things. So those are my recommendations right now. And again, you can go, your audience or listeners can go to danieltrevor.com. I have a 7-minute video at the top there that tells my story. I was in danger. I took the dive. This is what I discovered. Fix yourself. You can too.
Yeah. And one thing I want to add with the NMR panel is it also provides you with an LPIR score, which that is probably the most sensitive insulin resistance score other than the fasting insulin, which will be very affected by, your stress level that day, what you ate the day before. So other than C-peptide, which I think Dr. Berry recommends often, that comes out with the insulin marker, I think the LPIR score is also a good indicator of how insulin resistant you are or not. I also had Dr. Arthur Agustin on, who is the founder of the CAC test. And in our conversation, he shares so beautifully how that glucose tolerance test shows you, or the Kraft test shows you how much you're under the radar right now of being pre-diabetic. And in that, it's the graphs and the imagery that really makes it powerful. And so he shows and he tells you that if you have a little bit of stomach fat that you can grab, those are the little indicators that you might be pre-diabetic. So
That's right.
Yeah, I would highly recommend watching that video because he shares a presentation that is so powerful. And then it is the risk indicators that you might be, headed towards a cardiovascular event.
No, listen, I tell them besides I just blasted out an email last week and I was talking about this. I said, about the value of the finding out the OGTT with insulin and that kind of thing, and to find out if where you are in the diabetic spectrum. And if you're not going to do the test, another way to discover it is look down. If you see a belly, you're already there, because that's where it all starts. Do you think our ancestors had bellies? I mean, come on.
Right.
That's the beginning of, and again, it all started in the 20th century with the onslaught of these new kind of grains that are addicting, the candy, the vegetable seed oils. And again, that's why it's how carbs, sugar, and oils make us fat, sick, and addicted, and how to escape their grip. So besides it being a how-to book of how I reverse my 4 comorbidities, the heart disease, the diabetic physiology, the NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Another test you want to get, and you'll get this in your male panel or female panel, it's called GGT. That's gamma glutamyl transferase. Why is that important? And the medical field seems to be oblivious to it. Life insurance companies have to know who to accept and who to reject. They're not so interested in medical science. I mean, this is one of the reasons why they are great, these life insurance actuaries, in figuring things out, the numbers, right? That's why they're the most successful companies on the planet since what, the 1600s or something, when they would insure ships that would go off. Anyway, so they found that their number one predictor of all-cause mortality is having elevated GGT, gamma glutamyl transferase. And it's like, oh my God, I had that. It's supposed to be 65 or under. Mine was 265. Oh, wow. So I had to take a deep dive into that. And luckily I found Ivor Cummins. I found him, and he had the same thing as I did. And so I took the deep dive into that, and then I discovered why I had that. And that was because of the wheat and the grains and the high fructose corn syrup, because every cell in the body there's no cell in the body that can metabolize high fructose corn syrup. So it all goes to the liver, and it stores up fatty there.
So where can people find your book?
Go to danieltrevor.com.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. I think the information you shared today is helpful. And I think your book will help so many, that especially since cardiovascular events are the number one cause of death in America and maybe worldwide. So thank you so much again for your time.
Judy, thank you so much, and continue to do all the wonderful clinical work that you're doing, and like that. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much. Okay, guys, I hope that this interview gives you a little bit more information, guidance about testing, and what really we need to do about the heart health issue in our country. I hope that if you are eating whole grains or eating lower fat or eating less saturated fat because of your cholesterol levels, that you may question some of that belief. And in a lot of the interviews that Daniel has had with other people, he shares why a lot of the information that we are told about heart health, cholesterol, what to eat, and what tests to do, what preventative measures to do for heart health is a lot of misinformation. I hope that you continue to learn and grow and understand that no one cares about your health as much as you. And if that's a true statement, I hope you continue to do the homework and the research to understand what is best for your heart health and your overall health. Okay, guys, make sure to eat a lot of meat. Take care of your bodies, because it is the only place you have to live. I will talk to you later. Bye, guys.